Hello, podcast listeners. This is your host with the most. Let's talk about weddings. Let's talk about the changes in streaming services. We got a lot to discuss on today's JJ Meets World. And by the way, if you'd like to help support our podcast, visit jjmeetsworld.com where you can donate to our Patreon, pick up some killer swag at our merch shop, or click the link to Apple Podcast and give us a 5-star review.
1, 2, 3, 4. J.J. Gordon, sort of like that Indiana Jones in that he's always sniffing out his next adventure. Yes, he is! He's always interviewing guests so he can have them on his show and they can talk about pop culture, arts, and leisure. J.J. has his flag unfurled and he likes his french fries curled and he's fun and then he twirls as he goes to meet the world. He will march into the rain even if his ankle sprained. Take a peek inside his brain. This podcast is called J.J. Meets World.
Would you give me a level on you, please?
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Okay.
Testicles, wallet, and watch.
Do you know where that came from?
No.
Other than Austin Powers?
No. I don't know like the Latin root of it, no. The Germanic.
I believe it has to do with like the signs of the cross.
It does have to do with
like
that.
Spectacles, testicles, wallet, and watch.
But I wasn't certain like who first called it spectacles, testicles, wallet, and watch. I grew up making the sign of the cross because we would always do bless us, O Lord, for these thy gifts, which we are about to receive from thy bounty through Christ our Lord. Amen. And we would do the sign of the cross at the beginning and the end. My mom's from an Irish Catholic family. And so I grew up doing that. But we never were told, do this spectacles, testicles, wallet, and watch.
Well, I assume like they don't, like the church itself doesn't want you. They just want you to be like, eyes, navel, nipple.
Yes, that's what the priest usually says. He says, eyes, navel, nipple.
But the problem is that you were like, oh, okay, well, what nipple are you going to first?
JJ, let me say what I'm thankful for is you giving me the podcast title so early in this recording.
So we're just
eyes, navel, nipple.
Okay, so Tucker, I went to a wedding yesterday in what might be the nicest rural rustic venue I have ever been to. It was incredibly well thought out, and it actually has made me rethink that when my in-laws decide to move out of their little country farmhouse, I was like, I'll turn this into a wedding venue. Nope, they've done it a million times better than I ever could. And it got me thinking about weddings in general. And I thought we could start off the show by talking about some notable wedding moments.
Okay. Like in history or that we've been to?
Or both, right? Just wedding is a general theme, right? Because weddings, oh my gosh, the business of weddings is enormous. Did you know at one point I got into the wedding game, like as a professional MC, and I would go and MC weddings. I did like 4 of them.
When was this?
This is probably like in 2012, 2013.
Yeah, so it's weddings are sort of the first avenue of work for young multimedia people.
Bingo. And
at my new job, I'm working with a couple of young videographers, and they're doing weddings on weekends all the time. And I'm just like, yep, I remember that period of my life. And maybe I'll go back to that at some point. But boy, did I not like doing that at all. Now, unless I think photographers are the ones who will always have a great gig with weddings, because it makes total sense why you would want a professional photographer at a wedding. Things like DJs and stuff come and go, maybe. And I think videographers, I think the thing that depressed me the most about it was knowing that this will never be watched ever.
Bingo. I asked my wife on our way home, I'm like, have you ever watched our wedding video? And she said, no. Have you? Be like, nope.
Why would I want to watch a day that I was really stressed out?
Right. And for me, I think the thing is everybody who I could understand sending my wedding video maybe to someone who couldn't make it, but nobody.
Do you really think they're going to watch that? Unless they're your nana?
Unless they they're like, oh, I can't make it because I would love to make it to your wedding, but I can't because of blank. Maybe I'm deployed or whatever it is, and you might want to see it. Now, that being said, I know that a wedding that I officiated has been watched multiple times because my speech, my little sermon was so good and it was all nerd themed. Previous guest Britta Nelson, I officiated her wedding. And I'm always honored. I've done like 9 or 10 of these things now, and I'm always honored when somebody asks. And you have to be like, you usually know one person better than the other person. So you'd be like, I can't do it all for the bride, and like be like, and the groom's good too. So in this one, they said we want it to be really nerdy. And so I had a moment where I engaged the help of some of my other friends who I knew were going to be at the wedding. And I said, Britta and Case, would you please look out here? If there's anyone who thinks that these two should not be wed, and I had Shelley Fink stand up dressed as a witch, and she was like, a muggle marrying a wizard does not wear like this. And then I gave them both, I handed them both quick wands, and I fed them, I'm like, Petrificus Totalis. And so they cast a spell on her. And then Jason Jacobson stood up as Gandalf and goes, you two shall not wed. And they did something, I don't remember what they did to him. And Jake Harchie stood up as, Jake was Darth Vader.
Nice.
And they force choked Darth Vader. And I was like, this is just like...
That's fantastic.
And they had wigs and costume pieces and props. Wow. And so I think it even surprised them. So that one's been watched a couple of times. And then there's a nerdy... like a nerdy piece that people share on Reddit all the time, where it's like, your love will go 88 miles per hour, into the mouth of madness, and it's just, it burns hotter than Fahrenheit 451, like all of these different things that you can say that kind of wrap up a nerdy wedding. And so that's the only one I know that has been viewed a few times at least. But you're right, the videographer, and there are other things too. So I know people who keep the special knife to cut the cake.
Right. For
what right, exactly.
For the divorce.
For if a thief is there, you're going to stab them with your wedding knife.
Cut the umbilical cord with this.
This is our special knife. This is the family knife that we like to use important moments when cutting is required.
My great grandfather smuggled it over from Britain. It's the Revolutionary War.
It's so rusty.
It was the end of a musket at one point. If I ever get married, you won't be officiating it because you'll be in the wedding party.
I dig that.
But if I ever get married a second time, I'll definitely have you officiate, and you get to wear a captain's hat.
What?
Because I know that's a big deal for you, buddy.
I've wanted to marry someone.
It'll be your day.
Isn't it weird that for a long time, the only people who were legally allowed to marry someone were priests or captains and judges?
Well, and I think my understanding of the captain thing was that if you were on a boat and you wanted to get married at sea, and the person who is the highest ranking person on the boat is always the captain. It just is. So therefore, you want that person conducting the ceremony.
But that might not be the highest ranking person inside of a church. Well, I suppose it would be. The priest is the highest ranking person inside of a church.
Right, or the pastor or whatever.
And the judge leader inside of a courtroom.
Yeah. So
it'd be really awful if the president came to your wedding and you were in, or like a Supreme Court judge. And they're there and they're like, no, you take this.
You know what would be even more annoying than being asked to watch someone's wedding tape? Being invited to their vow renewal.
Oh, buddy.
That's never happened to me, but I hope it never does, because I'm going to oh, God damn it. Do you really need a second one? Do you really need all of us to show up again and dress up and fucking pay tickets to travel somewhere and do this?
I think that the only good thing about a vow renewal is you can really find out what's not working in their relationship, because that should be the things that they're really getting. If I vowed originally to stay faithful to you, I shouldn't have to do that at the renewal. I should have to say, I promise not to lie about what I watched on Netflix. Right. You should be taking stock into where you are at that point in your relationship.
If you're doing a vow renewal, you better have a couple of kids under the belt. You better have traveled some miles together. It better not be 5 years later. It better be it's our 25th anniversary is coming up, our 30th anniversary is coming up. We want to do something special. We're just going to, we're going to go get a room at the Olive Garden. And then once we're all done with the breadsticks, someone's going to come in and say a few words, and we're going to tell each other that we love each other, and then we're just going to eat after that, right?
Oh, there you go. That's glorious.
Yeah. But invite me to come for the breadsticks.
It'd be like, welcome to my Olive Garden renewal, brought to you by Olive Garden.
Do we have to stop eating while you're doing the renewal?
No. In fact, it should take place in the lobby while you guys are already enjoying your all-you-can-eat soup, salad, and pasta.
I will say one thing I do like about weddings, though, because I am, I'm not one of these people. I'm not one of these guys who thinks, oh, if I ever get married, she'll plan it. I'm not going to have any hand in it. No, fuck that. We'll both plan it. I definitely want a hand in the planning it. So when I go to weddings, I do look around for good ideas. Like, hey, what is there about this wedding that I actually liked? From your wedding, I loved the meatball buffet. Oh my God, the meatball buffet. I talk about that to this day to people. Like, guys, one time I went to a wedding that had a meatball buffet. It was pretty awesome. My cousin Ashley down in Kentucky, Uncle Tim's daughter, got married. They got married in what used to be a plantation. That's not the idea I'm going to take. But they had a cigar buffet outside, basically. Just like a big box of just a random assortment of cigars. And anyone who wanted to could just grab a cigar and sit outside and smoke a cigar. And I loved that. And I did that with my cousins. It was a really fun, like, cousin bonding thing because we all were like, look at us. We're all old enough now. We can actually do this. We feel so fancy. We're all dressed up. So I thought that was kind of a fun idea. I don't know. The other thing that I have taken with me from weddings, or that I know about weddings now, is that as the wedding videographer, there is one person who is at the wedding that you need to understand hates your guts.
Oh, yeah.
That's the wedding photographer. Wedding photographers hate the videographers. And I know this because I dated one for 5 years.
Ooh.
And she said that wedding videographers always get in the shots. They're always getting in the way of the photographs. And she was right to say this. The photos are more important than the video because the photos will actually be looked at. The photos are that encapsulation of the memory. The video is something that the bride and groom think they might want or the parents think they're going to want. And it's something that their kids might watch later on wistfully after their parents get divorced and they find the old wedding tape. But beyond that, no.
I'm a big fan of going to a wedding that says, listen, we're not going to do things the way things have always been done.
We like to have fun around here.
And then to find out that all they're doing is they're swapping the old traditions for what are considered like burgeoning traditions. Like you're going to see it a lot at weddings. I saw it last night at the wedding I went to, which was instead of having like tinking the glasses, like tink, 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 you had small little cowbells that you had to ring, but they didn't make like a lot of noise. So like everyone had to be doing it to be able to notice. And the wedding MC goes, all right, the first one's free, but the next one's going to cost you. So now every time that everyone clinks the bells, I'm going to read the name of another couple here, and they have to kiss, and then the bride and groom will copy the kiss they do. So the first one they do is with the groom's parents, and immediately Jill is just terrified that she and I are going to have to do some kind of kiss. And
why would I want to kiss my husband in public? But I did it once.
The idea was like you've got to do something like outlandish so that the couple has to do it, right?
Right.
And so they kiss, and then the father of the groom motorboated his wife. And so then you had to watch the bride and groom kiss and then motorboat.
That's so inappropriate.
It's so inappropriate. And that was the first one, Tucker. That set the bar for where we had to go. And so they were doing things like they were picking, like men were picking up their wives and like doing like a grind, like a bump and grind type
thing.
See,
those aren't kisses though. That's extra stuff from the kiss.
But that's the thing is like they do the kiss and then and so Jill, the more this goes on, gets more and more paranoid, and so I was giving her various scenarios that I was thinking up, and she had reasons to turn down all of them. I said one where like I go in to kiss you and you pull away, and then you go in to kiss me and I pull away, and then you finally like grab me and then pull me in and right, because that way it's sort of Pepe Le Pew-ish, right? And she goes, no, because then I'm going to look like a predator,
right? Did anyone do a Lady and the Tramp with a piece of spaghetti?
There was no spaghetti. There's only macaroni.
Oh, that would have been a little tough.
Wouldn't that have been great if it was spaghetti? Yeah,
that would have been a little tough.
And then I said, what about one where you throw water in my face? And I'm like, but, they're both wearing makeup to some extent, right? Yeah. So they can't do that. And so I kept saying, too, I was like, the odds of us being chosen are slim to nil because I don't actually remember RSVPing to this wedding. So we're probably not on a list somewhere.
It was more likely her parents would have been on that list.
Right. And in fact, there was
does anyone want to see that?
Right. Like what Pete and Claudia are going to do. Like, So there was a moment though that I had never seen this at a wedding. I thought it was kind of sweet where they have if you're a married couple, you go out onto the dance floor, and then after like 30 seconds, he goes, if you've been married 2 years or less, kiss your lover and then leave the dance floor. And so it's to find out who's been married the longest at that wedding.
Right.
And so they're whittling them down. And Pete and Claudia, who are celebrating their 51st wedding anniversary here in a little bit.
Okay, that's actually awesome.
So they were the one. And then there's a big round of applause.
That's actually pretty awesome.
And like the wedding MC was like, all right, Jordan and I can't remember her name, Lauren, like you could learn a lot from these two. And the MC... Oh, what? And this is why I stopped doing it. You don't know anybody, right? It's a thankless job because everyone's telling you what to do, even though you've been to enough of these things to know, like, it's a bad idea to do what you're suggesting right now. And I just need to get through this and I need to be done. And no one cares if I'm being funny because they want to talk to their Uncle Mick, and like discuss what's going on in the corn crops. And
I will say, I judge the couple based off of the music that plays.
Oh, do you?
Oh, big time. So like if you were to go to a wedding and it'd be like, try that in a small town, I'd be like, oh boy, I don't think I like this couple.
Right. I was telling Jill on the way home because I helped curate our wedding playlist. And I said, I think the biggest problem is that no one wants to dance right away, right? You start the dance, but nobody gets out there immediately. And so I knew two things needed to happen. Number one, a song that everyone dances to like as a group. So I chose Shout by the Isley Brothers.
Oh, nice.
Which was a huge hit right off the bat. Yeah. And I knew you need a couple who is going to, like, I assume the same thing happens at an orgy. Where you need like one couple to be really into it, and then like everyone else like, oh well, it's okay because they've ripped off the Band-Aid. And my dance couple was going to be David and Carrie Winterstein because I've seen them at several weddings.
Oh, they'll
such
dance.
Good dance.
Yeah.
They get really into it, and like they're the type of people who incorporate other people. And so I made sure. I think I pulled Carrie aside, and I'm like, I need you guys to come out right away.
I'm sure they were like done. Yeah, not a problem.
I don't know how they handle other situations, but like this one, like they're dance captains essentially.
Do you have a favorite wedding you've been to? I've got one, and I want to know if we have the same one.
Let's see. My favorite wedding that I've been to. Yes, I do, but not for the reasons that should be good reasons for like a wedding. Okay. My favorite wedding was my cousin Aaron's first wedding.
So we don't have the same one because I don't know your cousin.
No. But the thing I loved most about it is like, so my dad was sick with cancer at the time, right? And we've decided to not go ahead with any more treatment. And so my dad was just maintaining until he died at that point. And my cousin Aaron was getting married in Las Vegas. And so my parents decided, you know what we should do? We'll send Chrissy and JJ, both who are not 21 yet, to Las Vegas. Chrissy was still in high school, and I was freshly 19. We'll send you two to Las Vegas to represent our family and be like, yes, we will go to Las Vegas on our own and have some fun. And everything about that wedding was a disaster. And that's the thing that I love the most about it, including to the point of where while we were walking down to the wedding, another member of our family showed up and said, there might not be a wedding. And we were like, what's going on? They're like, well, they decided to make a prenup like on a piece of paper. And they're arguing right now about who gets the DVDs. And so you would think like at that point, like it is, but like I ate some amazing food while I was there and I saw family members from all over the place, and they got married at a Las Vegas, not like the little white chapel in Las Vegas, but like the MGM has a chapel inside their facility. And so it was neat. And yeah, I saw a Second City show while I was there, and we saw our first Cirque du Soleil show. And we did a lot of stuff while we were down in Las Vegas, and barely anything related to the wedding, and we weren't old enough to gamble. And this is, I think, one of the things I liked the most about Las Vegas on that trip. Because we weren't old enough to gamble, you had to look for all the other stuff Las Vegas offers. And there's a
ton.
lot.
There's so much.
If you don't get swept up into the world of like, oh, I want to go play craps at this place, or I want to play blackjack at this place. There is a ton of stuff. And now I think what they've done is they've really, I know Disneyfied is kind of a word that they use when referring to Las Vegas, where it's so much kid stuff. But back in the day, this was the early 2000s. What was so great about it was free stuff that was not all ages, but geared towards those people who are just not 21 yet.
Right.
And so now, you pay a lot now, right? So it used to be you could go to the Dolphin Experience at the Mirage, and it was something that was just offered to get you through the door. Well, now I think it's like $25 a person to go to the Dolphin Experience.
I mean, there's always Fremont. You can always go to the old strip.
But at this time they hadn't really redone Fremont Street yet to what it is now, like with the giant overhead screen.
Right.
At that point they were sort of like, when are we going to knock you down and put up something else instead?
When when I used to work for the Heartland Poker Tour, and we'd go to Vegas every once in a while to do a show, and we'd always stay on Fremont. So we wouldn't hang out on the main strip, we'd hang out in Fremont. And so there's street performers there, right? People dressed up in costumes you can pay to take photos with. There's people singing, people doing magic acts. But there was this one guy who we couldn't quite understand what his shtick was supposed to be. And we ended up I think Jeff Casper nicknamed him this, Baby Lap Dancer. Because he was doing this, he was dressed like a female stripper. And he was doing this an attempt at a sexy dance. And then he was doing it in front of a baby in a baby's carriage. He was doing it for the baby. And we saw him do that. And then we would see him every time, and no one would approach him. And so we'd always go get our photo with him. Did you guys see BLD this time? Was Baby Lap Dancer around?
And it's not like the baby had a dollar in its little fake hand, right? Or anything
no. This
like
was someone's actual baby. They weren't paying attention. They were looking at something.
Oh, I was gonna say so there's a real baby in this.
So in the first time we saw this guy, he was dancing for a baby.
Okay.
The baby was never there after that. But the first time we saw him was that. And then he basically, I don't even know if he's trying to perform. I think he's just a resident.
Sure.
Who's out there having a good time. And he'll take photos with you.
Okay. I mean, it's almost like the naked cowboy in New York City, right?
Just about. Yeah, like a part of the local flora and fauna.
I should also add, in my Las Vegas wedding extravaganza, the morning after the wedding, we went downstairs to have breakfast, and you could see the frustration in some of my family's face because they didn't get a wedding license. And so the wedding that they had was a sham wedding. And so at 1 o'clock in the morning, they had to do a drive-through wedding. So we didn't actually even get to see the real ceremony that took place.
You're saying this was the first marriage?
Yeah. So unsurprisingly, right? And so it was just it was great. What was your favorite wedding?
Greg Carlson and Katie Smith's wedding.
That's a good one.
And that was great because the ceremony lasted 2 minutes and happened before any of us got there. So that we all showed up and they're like, hey, we're already married and we're just having the reception now. And they were dressed up in their stuff, so you could see them in their tux and dress. They looked great. And then once they were done greeting people and stuff, they went and Greg went and changed. I think Katie stayed in her dress. I can't remember exactly. And Greg had curated the music list, and
which was amazing.
Greg has great taste in music, and so we all just sort of hung out and danced it. But really, the way it was set up was the reception was set up as like a performance art, right? So there was a couple of scenes that people did and stuff like that. But it was really fun. I remember you and Natalie. Didn't you guys make a gift of what was the gift you guys made?
We got a giant glass vase and we filled it full of random stuff, including mannequin parts and things like that. But it was essentially the idea was we know no one got you this. Is the idea. Because I've been to plenty of weddings where they don't actually need any. That was what my wedding felt like. Is Jill and I have lived together now for 7 years. We've been together for 12 years. We don't need anything. Back in the day, the wedding registry was all about, well, we're starting our life together, so we probably are going to need plates and we'll need a blender and stuff like that. So we don't need anything. So my registration included things like the Lego firehouse from Ghostbusters, to which Jill was livid about. And you know what? Davey B, who's been on our podcast, said, I saw this, I contributed to it, and then I went back and I contributed the rest of the way because that's a great idea for a gift, and I wanted you to have it.
You know, I think back to your wedding too, because like you said you don't have to dress up, you can just show up as you are, and I was like, that's good because my ex is your wedding photographer. I just want to like hide in the corner. I remember having to tell you right before a recording of our show, like, hey, just so you know, we broke up, and your first thought was, God damn it.
And I was like, you couldn't just wait 3 more weeks. Just wait it out. But I'm glad you didn't, because I don't think that you were in a good place with what was going on.
Her and I, neither of us were happy together, and we're in way better places now, and we've buried the hatchet and all that good stuff. But yeah, that was pretty awkward. So I just stayed in my little corner, and then ate meatballs.
Yep.
And it was fucking
good
great.
for you.
I loved it. I absolutely loved it.
I was also talking about how I would change my wedding guest list going forward. So I felt such an obligation to invite people. I should go back to this. So Jill had been waiting for me to propose after our like 4th date.
Oh, wow. So she waited for years.
I strung it along. In fact, at one point I moved back to Chicago and we were like long distancing this relationship. And so she waited.
You were really stress testing it is what you were doing. You were like, let's see how committed this really is.
And I was thinking about proposing to her in 2015, and then my mom got sick and passed away. And I told Jill, I was like, well, I feel that it's unfortunate that we didn't get engaged and get married because my mom could have been there. But, now for sure I'm not going to propose for at least a year because they say that you should wait, after a traumatic thing. She was like, that doesn't make any sense. She's like, we've been together for 9 years. Why? Why do you have to a year now? And I'm like, it's a year. It's a year. And at that point, we owned a home together. We were planning to move into my childhood home together. And so when I proposed to Jill, I made the decision, and then I enacted the help immediately of my sister because I don't know anything about like rings and stuff like that.
You know what? If I were to come up though with a nickname for Chrissy, it's Old Reliable.
Right? Exactly.
Sorry, Chrissy, I shouldn't call you old, but you are reliable.
Yeah, she can lean into that, right? So we went and we picked out the ring, and so I found this out. Do you know usually you get an engagement ring and then you go and you pick the wedding ring and they like fuse the 2 things together?
I've heard of that before.
So I was just like,
I think it's just a way to get you to buy 2 rings.
Right. I was like, I'm buying a single ring. So I walked in and they're like, well, what's her ring size? And I said, I don't know. And I was trying to show like with my thumb and my pointing finger. And they're like, that's not going to work. So
it's about this
yeah, it's
big.
like, like this. I would say it's less than a hot dog, but more than a Slim Jim. So I go and I was like, I'll sneak a ring out of her jewelry box. And they said, okay, we understand what you're doing here. Like you want to get close. She goes, but do you know that for sure this fits her? And I'm like, well, she's worn it before. And they're like, okay. And they were really nice. I went to Royal Jewelers in downtown Fargo. They're very nice. I said,
they better be nice. They're about to take you for like 10 G's.
Right. Well, and we had I had inherited a diamond from my grandfather, where my mother got it from my grandfather as part of his like shrine ring. And so then we got it from my mom, my sister and I, and Christy's like, well, why don't you put this shrine diamond in there, because it's a beautiful diamond and we don't know what the hell else we're going to do. We're not going to go to a diamond market and be like, what are you going to give me for this diamond?
Yeah.
So they're like, well, we can set it in and we'll do a 3-stone. So it's a big stone and then 2 little ones on either side. And they're like, do you want, they had a special name for it, but essentially it's a flat bottom on the ring. Have you ever seen this where it's a circular
I've never
area
gotten
where you put your finger?
Anywhere close to ring shopping.
Okay, so you know how like a standard ring, like Lord of the Rings? Like
yes, I do know Lord of the Rings.
It's just a round ring, and it's round on the inside and it's round on the outside.
Yeah.
So they make wedding rings for
I thought it was flat on the inside. No, you're right. It is round on the inside.
But yeah. Yep, I mean, it's like a circular hole and then a circular band, right? So what this is, it's a circular hole and then the band itself is round, but then the bottom of it goes flat.
Got it.
And they said because of that, it keeps the ring from like twisting around as much. So and when you put your hand down, like it lays flat, like how that. It's like, I didn't even know anything about this. I'm really getting educated in wedding rings today.
Right.
So I order the ring and they're like, here's what we're going to do. we're going to take a significant amount of money and put it on hold on your credit card. But we're going to give you this ring as the like proposal one, but we don't want to make your ring until she comes in and gets sized for it.
You know, that makes sense.
Right? And then she also was crass enough to say too, she's like, she could also say no.
Right.
And really,
this lady has seen some shit, JJ.
Right, she has. She knows that not every marriage is meant to be, right? So I had planned we were going on a family vacation with her folks and sister to Springfield, Illinois, where her gunkles lived. And Jill and I flew into Chicago and then rented a car and drove down because I wanted to spend some time in Chicago. Love me some Chicago, especially during the summer. It's over the 4th of July. And Jill's sister flew into Springfield directly, and then her parents drove because they're retired, so they're like, we just drive everywhere. We prefer it to flying. So I had orchestrated this piece where I had asked her parents' permission to wed her, and they said yes. Thank goodness. And then I contacted her sister, my sister, and her husband now, and then Phil and Jamie Lund. And I said, listen, I would like you guys all to come to Chicago after we're done with our adventure in Springfield. And what I'm going to do is you guys are all going to go to this restaurant, and Jill and I will come to the restaurant, and she won't know that you're going to be there because she thinks everyone has gone home or is not there. And then I'll propose, and then we'll have this fun night in Chicago, and it'll be a big thing. So everyone's all excited about this. It's the worst kept secret in Fargo because I told my partner on the radio, and like everyone here knew about it.
You said it on the radio?
I didn't say it on the radio, which thank goodness.
Because I mean, I know Jill doesn't listen to what you make, but damn.
But you know, the receptionist at Jill's work does, and so every time I say something about Jill, she runs over and goes, "Jill, is it true? Is it true that you drank from a sprinkler?" And so
does the receptionist listen to JJ Meets World? Probably not.
She might. You never know. Yeah. Like if she does, Joni's definitely keeping this one under wraps.
I don't know like what the Venn diagram of KFGO and podcasting in general really is, but I don't know if I'm guessing the JJ Meets World one, it has an overlap.
Yeah, there is definitely. And like in fact, I mean, Ryan, who listens to us all the time, shout out to Ryan, is a loyal KFGO and JJ Meets World listener.
There you go.
Right. And like, remember when we were doing the live, like you came on the show and someone was like, it's like a live version of JJ Meets World.
That's who that was. Okay.
So at least one person who was like willing to text in.
There was a short list of people that I thought that could have been.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah. Brent Brandt was on that list.
Oh, yeah. But I don't think it was his number.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyway, so I had made this plan to have this surprise proposal. So I fly out there. The ring is in a pair of socks. You know, I'm like balled up in my luggage. And everyone knows that this is going on but Jill. And so we're all trying to keep everything under wraps about what's going on. And I had to make sure that we left Springfield early enough that we could get to the hotel and check in before anybody else arrives at the hotel. So I knew what time everyone was flying into Chicago, what time my in-laws were coming up from Springfield. And we took a shortcut that turned out to not be a shortcut on the way back to Chicago, and it added an extra hour to our trip. And I'm thinking, oh no, this is a disaster. So we get to the hotel, and I've booked everyone's room. I'm footing the bill for the flights, for the hotel rooms, and all this kind of stuff because I want to make sure that everyone who wants to be there can be there and they don't have any financial duress. And so when I get in, I give them the confirmation number, and they're like, all right, so you're Brady Archer? And I immediately like panic, and I'm like, I hope Jill's not paying attention. Jill also has to go to the bathroom so bad that we got caught in Chicago traffic, and I think that her thought was she's going to pee her pants, right? Like there's going to be an issue. So she luckily has to pee so bad that she's not paying attention to what's going on. I'm like, no, it's under JJ Gordon. Stop it, lady at the embassy suites. Like, you're going to blow our cover. So we get up and Jill finally gets to go to the bathroom, and then she becomes a totally different person because she's not concentrating on having an accident.
Which I understand.
Yep, exactly.
I completely understand that.
You know, they get real quiet, and they're just, you can tell that all their brain power is like signaling, like, do not.
Yeah, especially if they've been traveling, so their body's been moving up and down and hitting that bladder.
And of course, you know, it's like a 2.5 hour drive from Springfield to Chicago.
Sure.
So we've had like some sugary beverages and things like that.
Pressure has been building.
So we get into the room, and the whole ride up Jill has been trying to convince me that we should just get married. Just get married, just get it over and done with. Not knowing that I'm about to propose, right? And she's like, listen, we could get married in the backyard, right? We'll have like a couple people over. It won't be a big deal. Like, let's just get married in the backyard and it'll be simple. And like that way we can just be done with it. No big deal. And in my mind, I'm thinking, you're going to really regret saying this. Like in 2 hours, you're going to regret saying this. You're giving me this hard sell. And so we got engaged at the Weber Grill restaurant, my favorite restaurant in Chicago, downtown. It's right off of the Grand Red Line stop. And we walked into the back, and I had let Weber know, so they had like pulled a curtain so they couldn't see anybody. And we weren't alone in this back room. There were 2 other large parties, one of them being a group of like Hooderites.
Okay.
Who, their table was so big, I was like, their bill's going to be like $6,000. Yeah. There's no way it's not going to be.
Can we pay you in milk?
Right. be like, mother, could you please gather the cattle? But so that was the story of like how we got engaged, and I immediately made the joke. I'm like, so you want to get married in the backyard? And she was like, no. And she's crying. In our wedding, I gave Jill the option, going back to the beginning where you said, like making the decisions, like I'm not the man who's going to be like, well, the wife is going to do. I gave Jill the option. I said, you can either have me involved with everything, but then I'm going to give you my opinion on everything as a showman, or I can be out of it. So which one do you want? And she goes, well, I want you to be involved. And I'm like, okay, great. I want to get married at Camp Cormorant. And I also want to get married before the end of the year so that we can enjoy the tax benefits for this year, for 2018.
And also, I'm going to be doing this play, the Sandland Diaries. And so
yeah,
I'd really like to get that wrapped up.
That was the thing is, so I got engaged, and it was 2 weeks later that I had dinner with Pam Strait, and she gave me the hard sell on Santaland Diaries, and I'm like, okay, so... And at that point, I was planning on getting married the first weekend of October. So I thought, okay, it's just a slight overlap. There's no real big deal here. But we went, and Jill found her dress on her like second visit to the dress shop. And she said, okay, this is mid-July, mind you. And she said, we're planning on getting married the first weekend of October. And they're like, there's no way. There's no way that we'll ever have this dress ready by the first weekend of October. Impossible. So she came home and we said, okay, well, what if we moved it to the end of October? We'll do the last weekend of October. They said, okay, there's a good chance we could have it ready by the end of October. And then they had it ready a week later. I was so pissed. I was like, you damn dress people. You ruined everything. Unfortunately, that
rarely happens.
It rarely, like, that they ever, mislead you in any way, shape, or form.
Took a month and a half for them to hem my pants.
Oh, God. A month and a half. But it was worth it, wasn't it?
Oh, my God. It's so good.
So we couldn't use Camp Cormorant as our venue. I'd been to one other wedding there that was friggin' awesome. Like, I thought that was just great because you rent out the camp for the weekend.
Sure.
So you get to use all the bunkhouses and the mess hall and all like the kayaks and stuff. Like you get people go to camp.
Right.
So, in fact, I was at a real hippie dippy wedding, and then it started to rain, and so all the hippies went out and danced like in the mud and everything. And I thought, I hope it doesn't rain on my wedding. But they were going to be closed for the season at that point. So I said, okay. So we started looking for another venue, and someone suggested a place that was in Davenport, North Dakota, and we drove out there, and they said, listen, this will be a space, but right now it's just a concrete slab. That's all that was there, a concrete slab. And they said, we were planning on opening the first weekend of November, but I guess we could put up, a week early for you guys to come to this wedding. And they were doing something that I've seen other venues do where they go, now we do have someone else who's interested in this weekend. So if you want it, you need to pay right now. And I said, listen, call those people and ask them if they want this thing, and you can tell them that they can pay now. We'll let you know. And so we get in the car, and my mother-in-law and my wife were livid with me. They're like, what are you doing? Are you insane? Like, we could have taken that. I'm like, I am calling their bluff. I'm letting them know who they're working with. There's nobody else. Nobody else is dumb enough to come out here and look at a concrete slab and be like, okay, I'll have my wedding here. I'm sure construction never goes over. And so they ganged up on me, and before we even hit the interstate, they called back and they said, here's a credit card for the deposit and everything. And I think I could have gotten them down a little bit, like in the cost. But we were the first. What is unique is we were the first people to have our wedding in that venue. What's not unique, though, is they were screwing in like the doorknobs as we were there. At one point, one of the groomsmen got trapped in the men's room because there was no handle to pull to get out. So they're pounding on the door. They're like, I'm trapped in the bathroom. I'm trapped in the bathroom. And the venue was great. It had some sound issues. I mean, anything you could imagine for being the first group out there. But I will say that like now there's been like 1,000 weddings out there, and it's not as unique as it would have been. A summer camp, I think, would have been really unique. The wedding you talked about loving to go to, Greg and Katie's, at the Plains Art Museum, which is a great venue.
Yeah.
Very wide open. There's a lot of space for people to go and like mingle and go about. One other thing I remember about that wedding is anyone who spoke had to name their favorite Muppet.
Yep.
Which I think is a great choice.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I think I went with Sweetums because I always go back and forth between Sweetums and Animal. You know, they're both very similar.
You like the Shaggy, ones?
It's something about that sort of buffoonish monosyllabic, very simple but very pure. I think they're both kind of pure at heart, even though they are Shaggy monsters.
There was somebody who went up and they said, I don't know the name, but it's the guitarist for the Electric Mayhem. And I shouted out, Floyd Pepper! And so it was like my whole life had led to that moment of being able to fill that one out.
It's from Greg's wedding that I know that Greg's favorite Muppet is New Zealand, who throws the boomerang fish.
I throw the fish and they come back to me.
Just today, while scrolling through my Facebook feed, there was some account had posted the video of the very first appearance of Kermit on television.
Oh.
And it was delightful. It was this whole gag where worms are coming up to him. Like, I forget what song is playing, but he's like humming along to the song. And then a worm would come up and like tap him, and then he'd eat the worm. And it was just this over and over again. And the announcer goes, and so, yeah, for the very first time, the Muppets. And he has to start getting the clapping going because no one knows who the Muppets are yet. But the Kermit performance was already there. You can see it's kind of a proto Kermit from what we know and love.
It didn't have the collar. I bet it was.
I don't think it had the collar, but it was. I've seen photos of other proto Kermits. I think it was a little further along than that. So I don't know if this was the very first TV debut or if it was like the first national TV debut or what. It was in black and white. That I can say.
Was it on the Jimmy Dean show? Does you know by any chance?
I don't remember. I really don't.
Because the Jimmy Dean show, he loved Jim Henson, and I think Rolf was the first like puppet that he brought on, Ralph the dog.
Speaking of weddings, Kermit and Miss Piggy's wedding.
That's a great wedding.
It's a beautiful wedding.
They did things that we didn't even know possible at that point, which is you brought the Sesame Street Muppets, and they were part of the regular Muppets.
Yeah, everyone came. Everyone got an invitation. Now other Henson Creature Shop characters, the Ninja Turtles weren't there.
They weren't, but they would be today. An interesting fact about that. So the wedding that takes place in the Muppets Take Manhattan.
What year did that come out?
1985.
Oh, the Turtles movie didn't exist yet. That's
right.
Why. I was born that year, though. So
1985 was a good year. Good year to be born.
Good year to be born. Good year to have a Muppet wedding.
It was also the first Muppet movie not directed by Jim Henson. It was directed by Frank Oz.
Okay.
So, the wedding takes place during a stage show called Manhattan Melodies that the Muppets are all starring in. That's why they take Manhattan, is because they want to put on a Broadway show. And so there's a whole song like somebody's getting married, and it leads up to all of these people at this giant church, and it's being watched by an audience, right? And a priest walks up as soon as Piggy gets to the front of the altar, and Kermit leans over and he goes, I thought Gonzo was playing the priest. And Piggy's like, just go with it. And that's the thing, is like she's arranged a real priest, so it's a real wedding. Yeah. And he does I do.
So he basically she forces him into a marriage at that point.
You also get an interesting
Piggy is very aggressive,
and and she's smart. She reminds me a little of Cartman, right? Like,
sure,
so smart, but also so self-involved all the time. And there's one other Muppet wedding scene that takes place in the Muppets Most Wanted, which is their most recent theatrical film, and it's not nearly as entertaining or good as this one.
Yeah,
this one is perfect. It's a perfect wedding.
I think things just become the victim of their own success.
Right?
Because then there's so much money involved that people who are only there for the money and don't care about the heart of it, they're pulling the strings. And so it's more of you're going through a whole council of people who get to have their input on it. And you're pressured to make all these pop culture references and do all these things that they have market tested and will resonate on some level.
Right.
Versus just telling a story from your soul.
And you think of, when was the last time you watched the first Muppet movie?
A long time.
So it's well worth going back with your sensibilities as an adult, because there are gags that they keep going back to. It's very vaudeville and a lot, So at one point, someone's like, "Don't touch that frog, you'll get warts." He goes, "That's a myth." Well, what? A myth. And Carol Kane, she turns around, she goes, "Yes," as if he's asking her. And that bit, and then 45 minutes later in the movie, someone is like, they're like, "You'll get warts," and he goes, "That's a myth," and she pops out from behind a tree. They're like hundreds of miles away from this bar, and she goes, "Yes." And it's stuff like that really just, when they were making that movie, it was a bunch of people getting together being like, well, we better do a good job because this might be the only time they ever let us do something like this.
Right. And we really care. We actually love these things. We actually love these characters. We actually love this thing we're making, and we're putting ourselves into it. Versus, I got hired to do this job, and my job is to make sure that the shareholders, squeeze as much money out of this thing through merchandising as possible.
Which is too bad, because some of the some of the longest life you get out of a piece of media is someone doing it because they're like, "Listen, we're going to make this thing work. We don't have $100 million. We've got $500. I think of something like Evil Dead. And Evil Dead, I mean, they had to use every trick they could. Clerks, right? Like, what are the movies that were made, or even like television shows to some extent that were made where they're like, well, we don't have any money, so we're just going to do the best that we can with what we have. And sometimes necessity is the mother of invention, right?
Have you ever watched that YouTube show? I think it's called Hot Ones.
With the wings?
Hot Wings, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's called
Hot Ones.
Hot Ones, yeah. I believe it's one they did with Matt Damon. Because the guy who, I forget the host's name, he's amazing. He does a fantastic job of interviewing. He's got really great, well-researched questions, interesting questions, because he's only got like 5 to 10 questions he can ask, because that's how many sauces they're trying. You should look this up on YouTube if you get a chance, but he asks Matt Damon, like, how come we're not seeing, in the 90s, we were seeing all these amazing, like, indie films getting made, on relatively large budgets where they were shooting it on 35 millimeter film, and they clearly had a crew to do it, and they had some stars in it. But they weren't, big concept. They weren't laden with CG, but they were good films. They were good stories. How come we're not getting that anymore? And Matt Damon goes, it's because the DVD market went away. And that was the thing that allowed those things to get made, was because the people who would finance those movies knew they're probably not going to break even at the box office, but they know they will make money in the market after the box office.
Sure, if I can sell one VHS tape to every Blockbuster in the United States,
right,
I'm going to make, I'm going to sell 2,000 copies no matter what.
Right, and when the world was DVDs, there was a huge craze for them, because on the DVD you got all the extras, you got behind the scenes stuff, you got commentaries, all these really interesting things. And that doesn't exist anymore. I mean, you can buy a Blu-ray or a 4K disc, but it's not at the popularity level as it was then. And they're not usually filled with the kind of features that would get you to buy that thing anymore, because now streaming and piracy have both just sort of taken the wind out of those sails. And so there's no guaranteed way for those movies to recoup their cost on the back end, which I think is really sad. So it means that filmmakers are going to have to find out a way. I think we're going to see, I think we will see careers of filmmakers more and more who have to become even more entrepreneurial and understand that for me to make the movies that I want, I actually have to be the executive producer of the film in some way. I have to be using my money. I have to be doing it in some way where I can figure out how to fund this and how to market it and how to sell it and recoup my costs. Because the smart money, quote unquote, out there, they're looking for the big budget CG things that they know will make money at the box office, because that's where they need to make the money at. Or if it's a streaming service, Right now, you're not going to be getting any residual payment. You're going to get a fee one time for the rights to it, and then they're just going to have it on their platform and hope that they continue to have people subscribe to their platform and that revenue's coming in. So it's a different model that has kind of gutted the kinds of movies that we loved seeing get made in the 90s, right? The Clerks, the Pulp Fictions, right? The stuff where it took a budget to make that movie, but nowhere near the budget that it takes to make The Flash, right? Which is basically hot garbage now that I've rethought about it over and over again. A movie that's so self-aware and so product-focused and so market-tested and so calculated to try and hit your dopamine levels at a certain way that it has no heart and soul and has nothing of lasting value to the viewer. It just has lasting value to those who own the merchandising rights.
I was just watching a movie that I love from 1997 called Suicide Kings, and it's a Christopher Walken movie. It refers to was like the King of Hearts, I think. It looks so. Like on the Hoyle cards, it looks like he's putting a knife or a sword into his head. And the premise of the movie is genius. It's these 4 Ivy League guys. It's like Jay Moore and a bunch of other people who were popular in the 90s and then disappeared. And
because DVDs went away. And one of them, their younger sister, has been kidnapped, and their father refuses to pay the $2 million ransom. And so for them to save their younger sister, or this guy's younger sister, they decide they're going to kidnap a mafia boss and hold him hostage until they get the girl back. And not that they assume he's the one who kidnapped her, but that he has enough ties to the underworld that he could figure out who kidnapped her and get her back, right? And Christopher Walken plays the character, Charlie Barrett, but his name is like Cardo Budalucci or something like that. And it's just a great movie where it's done in like a bottle episode where the majority of the film takes place inside the living room of this mansion where he plays them. So at one point he gets an inside tip when he's trying to figure out who kidnapped these girls, because he's duct taped to a chair for almost the entire movie. And they're like, we think it might have like an inside player. And so he's trying to get them to turn on each other. And he's playing a poker game with these people, right? Movie is so good. And Dennis Leary is amazing in it. Oh my gosh. He plays sort of he plays a character named No-No. And he is he's Christopher Walken's kind of like enforcer. And so he's the one who's going and interrogating people and asking random questions to, get his boss back. But while I watched that movie, I thought, okay, so I looked it up and they're like, they spent $5 million to make this movie. And during its entire theatrical run, it made like $15 million. So it was a very successful movie to them in its theatrical run. But its like home video run was huge, and it became a movie that got just pushed to other people. Like, so even if you didn't see it in the theaters, it just got bigger and bigger and bigger, and kind of that poker craze. Like, it was the right time with rounders and things like that. Yep.
And so I just think to myself, gone are the days of where I will walk through a video store and find a movie just based on the cover art or who's in it and go, oh, I should check this out, and then read the back and grab the tape or the DVD. And that's how we found Suicide Kings.
Yep.
It's how I found Pool Hall Junkies, Boiler Room. I mean, there were so many awesome movies that I feel like really defined my tastes for a long time. The Road to Wellville. And because we don't have cable companies who are taking a risk and buying some of these movies too, you're not experiencing these movies at USA at 3:00 in the morning, where I first saw Mansquito, half man, half mosquito. And like, you don't see those things anymore because I'm only watching what is being pushed to me through a streaming service, or, like, I'm not flipping through the channels anymore. Right. And that's like unfortunate because you only really find things nowadays based off of someone's suggestion.
It's too much hot garbage you have to wade through.
Hot garbage. And they're pushing a lot of real bad hot garbage. Like, every now and then a hot garbage is good, like the movie Enough with Jennifer Lopez. That's hot garbage, but it's worth it. As we round out this episode, I want to say that I do enjoy weddings. Don't stop inviting me to your weddings. But also, I'm not going to every wedding I'm invited to anymore. Like, gone are the days of where I think I have I've got to go to this because of blank. Like, I'm just going to go to these things when they make sense in my schedule. And there are people who go to like 12 weddings a summer.
Yeah.
That's not going to be me.
No, like I'm definitely, I'm totally cool, even with my close friends, if you don't invite me to your wedding. That's totally fine. But
we're totally fine if you don't show up.
You know, but like, I think if I ever get married, I think a lot of people are going to show up just out of morbid curiosity. Like, this actually fucking happened? Are you kidding me?
Who is he marrying?
Who is marrying him? Like, how is this happening? Did he pay them? Are they from another country? Kind of a thing. And people can take bets on, you know, how long it lasts.
That's always the great thing. Like, when the conversation is like, I give it 6 months. Really? I don't even know if they say I do. I think one of them might run away.
I've got a really good streak of winning those bets.
Do you?
I really do. I feel like I can, like, just that will it last or not, that bet, I'm really, really good at.
Oh, interesting.
That's going to wrap it up for today's show. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to help us continue to produce new episodes each week, visit jjmeetsworld.com, where you can donate to our Patreon, pick up some swag at the merch shop, or follow our link to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review. You can also follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, all the sites the cool kids are using these days. JJ Meets World is produced every week by Tucker Lucas. You can find out more about Tucker's work by visiting moonbasemaria.com. If you want to get in touch with your host with the most, check out linebenders.com, where you can find direct contact info for JJ or booking information.
The thing about weddings is that if you like them and get addicted to them, you're also addicted to either killing your spouse or divorcing them.